I gave 25 years of my life to a company only to be fired overnight by a CEO chasing modernization. They thought they let go of just a title, but what they lost was the trust I built, the clients I nurtured, and the soul I helped shape. When those same clients refused to work with my replacement and the company began to unravel, I realized my true power had never been in my position. It was in the loyalty I earned. Now, with the support of the firm quietly acquiring them, I'm not coming back as an employee, I'm returning as the force they never saw coming. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life inspired power stories like this one. That morning unfolded like countless others. The espresso machine hummed its familiar tune. My heels clicked rhythmically across the marble lobby, and colleagues, once interns I had mentored, greeted me with polite nods. I had no inkling I was stepping into my own professional funeral. The conference room on the 27th floor had always been my arena of triumph. There, I'd sealed multi-million-dollar deals, averted crises, and forged client relationships that lasted lifetimes. But that day, the air felt sterile, staged. Dominic Clay, our new CEO, sat at the table's head, his demeanor cool, resolved, like a man who'd already rehearsed delivering bad news. Young and polished, he seemed oblivious to the history etched into the room's walls. "Elaine," he said, his voice slick with corporate polish, "as part of our restructuring, the board has decided to eliminate your position, effective immediately." No hesitation, no flicker of doubt, just the words, delivered flat. The world didn't tilt or crumble, it simply stopped. I held his gaze, letting silence stretch until he shifted uncomfortably. "I see," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the storms I'd weathered in life, far worse than a CEO armed with a slideshow and a severance packet. Janice from HR sat beside him, eyes averted, nervously twirling a pen she'd never use. She slid an envelope across the table. 2 months' salary, benefits through the quarter, and a generic thank you letter signed by someone I barely knew. I nearly laughed. Instead, I nodded, rose, and left. Not once did they ask my thoughts. Not once did they acknowledge the clients, our company's lifeblood, who knew me by name, sent me birthday texts, invited me to their children's weddings. To Dominic, I was a cost to cut, a line item erased. Walking to my office to pack, I passed framed photos of our greatest victories. I was in nearly every one, smiling, leading, delivering. No one followed me, no one spoke. In my office, I slipped off my wedding ring, not from marital doubt, but a ritual to sharpen my focus. And God, I needed focus. The silence roared, my nameplate, a crystal paperweight from a grateful client, a brass elephant from a Mumbai partner. I packed them carefully, like relics sealed in a crypt. I didn't cry until I reached my car, not out of sorrow, but clarity. They thought they'd excised me from the company. What they failed to see was that to those who mattered most, I was the company, and now I was free. The hallway stretched longer than usual, not in distance but in weight, as if the air had thickened with unspoken truths. I clutched the cardboard box like a shield, not from shame, but to spare myself the glances of colleagues I had mentored, laughed with, fought for. No one met my eyes. A few offered strained half-smiles, one mouthed, "I'm sorry," but kept walking. I didn't fault them. Silence is a reflex when speaking feels risky. Passing the break room empty, I caught sight of the framed poster above the coffee station. "People first." I nearly scoffed. By the elevator, my arms ached under the box's weight, but I welcomed the strain. It tethered me, a reminder I was still here, still standing. The doors parted, I stepped inside. As they began to close, a voice broke through. "Elaine, wait," I turned. Miguel, one of my direct reports, young, sharp, quietly brilliant, stood there, his expression torn, like he wasn't sure he had the right to speak. "I didn't know," he said, catching his breath. "I found out 5 minutes ago." "I know," I said gently. He edged closer then. "They think they can replace you. They don't get it." A faint smile crossed my lips. "They'll learn soon enough." The doors slid shut and his silhouette faded. Standing alone, I realized I hadn't said goodbye to anyone, not from oversight, but because it didn't feel final. It wasn't. The drive home was quiet. My grip on the steering wheel was tighter than needed, the radio off. I let silence settle around me like a familiar companion. My phone buzzed texts from coworkers, even clients catching wind of whispers, but I left them unanswered, not yet. At home, I poured a glass of wine, not for indulgence, but as a quiet ritual. 25 years distilled into a Thursday afternoon and a cardboard box. I sipped slowly, letting the bitterness linger. In my study, sunlight sliced through the blinds, casting the room in sharp gold and shadow. On the bookshelf sat an old photo. Mommy, Arthur Franklin, our founding partner and our first major client. We were younger then, unguarded, raw in our ambition. Arthur had seen something in me, a regional manager with no elite credentials. You don't need the loudest voice, he'd say. You need the one they lean in to hear. I thought of the night I stayed up crafting a recovery plan to save a crumbling deal. No one had asked. I just knew losing that client would cost more than money, it would erode trust. By morning, I was on a flight to Boston, walking into their boardroom like I owned it. We didn't just save the deal, we strengthened the bond. That client stayed for 17 years, always calling me directly. Those moments they couldn't erase. Later, I opened my laptop not for RSUMs or LinkedIn, but a blank document. At the top, I typed 3 words. What comes next? Before I could reflect, my phone lit up. A name I hadn't seen in years, David Ellison. A shiver ran through me. David, a titan who'd built one of our most valuable client portfolios, had semi-retired, though we still traded holiday cards. I let it ring twice, then answered. Elaine, he said, his voice warm, familiar. Tell me they didn't just toss you out like I heard. I stayed silent. I warned them when they hired that boy Wonder, so he doesn't understand loyalty or people. He sighed sharply. When you're ready, call me. We don't want whoever's replacing you, and I'm not alone. I glanced at the screen, those 3 words glowing back at me. They weren't a question anymore. They were a claim. What comes next is mine to shape. Those first mornings felt like waking up in a stranger's skin. No blaring alarms, no urgent conference calls, no cascade of client meetings, just silence. Not the kind that soothes, but one that creeps, fraying the threads of who I'd been. I tried to anchor myself with routine, rising at 7:30, brewing coffee, wandering the neighborhood's quiet streets, but the stillness wasn't restful, it was a void, a hollow where purpose and relevance once thrived. I sorted my pantry, lined up spices in neat rows, scoured grout I'd never noticed before. I even flirted with the idea of a pottery class, yet whenever I tried to lose myself in a book or a show, my thoughts drifted to boardrooms, to late-night calls, to the rush of being the one who held it all together. No one tells you how it feels to be carved out of the world's rhythm. Life churns on, emails ping, deals close, and for a sharp, cruel moment, you wonder if you were ever as crucial as you believed. That thought, it cuts deepest. Then came Thursday. I was clipping hedges, the air thick with spring, when my phone buzzed, an unfamiliar New York number. I wiped sweat from my hands and answered, more instinct than intent. Elaine Hartley, a woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? Maya Alvarez, Corliss Partners. We met years ago in Geneva. You bailed my team out of a sinking pitch, remember? I did. She'd been a young account lead, wired with nerves, but bright. I'd stayed up late with her team, reshaping their strategy before a make or break board meeting. Never heard from her after. I remember, I said. Head of strategy now, right? A beat. Yeah, listen, we heard about your exit, news travels. I didn't respond. Your replacements, we're not impressed, neither are some big accounts. They're raising flags, thought you should know. My breath caught. Thanks, Maya. People are talking, she added, then hung up. I stood frozen, clippers dangling, pulse quickening. That call was a lifeline, a reminder I hadn't faded into nothing. The next week brought more. A text from a Dallas procurement chief, a voicemail from a Seattle exec, a LinkedIn message from a European contact silent for years. Their words echoed, they blew it. You meant more than they know. What's next for you? One said, we're holding off on renewals until we hear your plans. That evening, I poured Pinot Noir and opened a spreadsheet not from obligation, but hunger. I mapped names, firms, bonds, not accounts people. The truth hit like a spark. They'd stripped my title, but not the trust I'd earned. Trust didn't live in boardrooms or letterheads. It was woven into late calls, birthday notes, the quiet care I showed for their lives, their kids' names, their unspoken fears. That was never a line in my bio, but it was my core. I reached out to Ruth, my last tie to the old executive circle. We met at a dim wine bar off Michigan Avenue. She studied me, half expecting a ghost. "You holding up?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "I'm not raging, if that's what you mean." "Dominic didn't see this coming," she said, voice low. "The board's spooked. Major clients are resistant." I twirled my glass. "You can't just swap out a face and expect trust to follow. It's not a memo you pass along." She leaned in. "They saw you as polish, grace, charm, but Elaine, you were the pulse, the leverage." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She'd named what I already felt. For now, I'd stay quiet. My time to act was coming. 2 weeks after my exit, a Google alert pinged. Franklin and Associates faces client retention challenges amid restructuring. I clicked instinctively. The article was polished, vague, but the undercurrent was clear trouble was brewing. 3 key clients had stalled contract renewals. A fourth was reviewing strategic alignment, code for we might walk. I didn't gloat. I watched, sensing something I'd nurtured long ago stirring beneath the surface. The real jolt came 2 days later. A text from an unknown number, sharp and urgent. "Call me now. D. Ellison." I dialed. "Elaine," David Ellison growled. "I just endured 20 minutes of a junior rep butchering my company's name. I asked about you, and he had the gall to say, 'She wasn't aligned with our future vision.'" I stayed quiet. "So I told him our vision doesn't include Franklin and Associates either. I've yanked the renewal papers. You were the only reason we stayed." "David," I started, "I'm grateful." "No," he cut in, "I'm furious, not at you, at them. And I'm not alone." He wasn't exaggerating. By week's end, 6 former clients reached out, some discreet, others blunt. One forwarded an internal Franklin email subject, "How do we explain Elaine's absence?" The reply? "Frame it as modernization. Modernization, 25 years of averting crises, weaving networks, earning trust distilled to a buzzword." I met Priya, a fintech COO I'd brought on 5 years earlier, at a quiet Indian spot in River North. Over chai, she vented, "They sent a guy to our review who kept misnaming our product. Elaine, you didn't just manage us, you understood us." "They'll figure it out," I said, probing. She shook her head. "We can't wait for that. Where are you landing next?" I didn't know yet, so I didn't answer, but gears were turning. Later, Miguel called from his personal phone, voice hushed. "Elaine, it's a mess here. Comms is in panic mode, trying to spin the story. Dominic's floundering. They're losing control." "Because of me?" I asked, uncertain. "Because of what you built," he said. "You held it together." I sank into my couch, his words settling like truth. I'd tried to fade gracefully quiet, dignified, but maybe grace wasn't in vanishing. Maybe it was letting the weight of what I had created speak for itself. The final spark came anonymously, a leaked email, urgent account retention risk, Hartley impact assessment. No note, just a PDF. Inside, a matrix-tracked client unrest tied to attachment to EH, color-coded. Red dominated. That's when it clicked. They hadn't just underestimated me, they'd misjudged trust itself. Not out of malice, but ignorance. They thought influence flowed from titles. It doesn't. It grows from connection, from late-night calls when a client's spiraling, from remembering birthdays, from knowing their fears without being told. They didn't see that. I did. And so did everyone who mattered. I always believed loyalty wasn't demanded, it was earned, forged through every email, every call, every crisis weathered. What I never anticipated was how that loyalty would trail me, even after I was no longer tethered to a company name. By the 3rd week of my so-called early retirement, my inbox needed a new folder, unsolicited offers. It began with a courteous note from an East Coast consulting firm. "Elaine, your departure's made waves. We've long admired your client engagement. Could we discuss you leading a relational strategy division?" Then a LinkedIn message from a former rival who'd once tried and failed to steal my top accounts. "I don't believe in fate, but timing, that I trust. Let's talk." By week's end, I had 4 coffee meetings lined up, 3 discrete calls scheduled, and an NDA sitting in my email from a firm I'd outmaneuvered on a billion-dollar deal years ago. I wasn't flattered, I was curious. For the first time in decades, I was unshackled. No corporate ladder, no office politics, no need to soften edges for appearances. I could ask hard questions, say no without hesitation, meet a CEO's gaze knowing I needed nothing from them but respect. That shift felt like power I'd never wielded, even with an executive title etched on a door. On a brisk Wednesday, I met Julian White, CEO of Revel Strategies, at a private club with lake views. He cut straight to it. "No VP slot here," he said, stirring his espresso. "We want you to shape our next phase. Full control, your team, your vision, answering only to me." I tilted my head. "Why now?" He leaned back, eyes sharp. "Franklin did the industry a favor. They proved relational capital can't be swapped out like software. You're living proof, Elaine." I didn't answer immediately, not from doubt, but calculation. "Just so we're clear," I said evenly, "I'm not here for revenge." His smile was knowing. "Nor am I. I'm here for legacy." That night, I cradled a glass of bourbon, not wine, but the drink of choices. In my study, I sifted through notes from the week's offers. Most were smart, some enticing, all polished, yet one email kept pulling me back. Brief and enigmatic. Sent 3 days prior. "Let's meet. I think we're building something you'd want in on. ML." The initials puzzled me until I caught the signature. Margot Langston, founder of Langston Group. Private equity titan, quiet, relentless, brilliant. Known for snapping up struggling firms, reshaping their leadership, and turning them into powerhouses. Why she wanted me, I couldn't guess. But I knew this: if Margot was reaching out, something seismic was brewing. The next morning, I replied with 2 words: when and where. I wasn't chasing a job anymore. I was claiming a seat at the table. And perhaps, just perhaps, my old company was about to learn I hadn't been erased. I'd been unleashed. The meeting with Margot Langston wasn't in a gleaming tower or a polished boardroom. It unfolded in an art gallery, private, spare, its walls bathed in muted grays and hushed light. I arrived early as always. She swept in precisely on time, as if punctuality were her creed. Margot defied expectation. No tailored suit, no trailing aids, just a navy trench, low heels, and quiet authority that needed no fanfare. She approached, hand outstretched. "Elaine Hartley, exactly as I pictured." I smiled faintly. "I'm not so sure." She nodded toward a secluded corner where a small table waited, set with coffee, water, and a notepad, deliberate, almost quaint. We sat, no pleasantries, no flattery. She cut to the bone. "In 4 weeks, we're acquiring Franklin and Associates, discreetly through layered investments." My pulse didn't race. It froze. She pressed on, steady as a blade. "Dominic Clay's in the dark, the board splintering, desperate for an exit. We're giving them one." I met her gaze. "Why tell me?" "We don't just want the company," she said, voice low. "We want its heart. We've done our research. They cut you to seem forward-thinking, but you were the one keeping it alive." I let her words sink in, heavy and true. Margot leaned closer. "You have 2 paths. Take a generous offer, start fresh elsewhere, or return. Not as a symbol, but a force?" I tilted my head. "Define force." Her eyes didn't waver. "Strategic partner, no direct reports unless you want them. No posturing for optics. You answer only to me. You shape the culture, the client vision, the moral core. You'd be the conscience they thought they could erase." I drove home in a silence that hummed with possibility. The thought of stepping back into those halls where I'd packed my life into a box as colleagues averted their eyes, stirred unease. Yet a deeper part of me, seasoned and sure, felt a quiet thrill. I'd learned something since leaving. True power doesn't roar or preen. It's the unseen hand guiding the room's breath. And I'd never needed a title to wield it. 2 days later, I met Margot again, this time in Langston Group's nerve center, a war room of maps, charts, and projections. Franklin and Associates lay dissected, a chessboard in play. She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a reintegration plan and a new org chart with a blank space at the top, a partner, client, and culture vision. "Shape it your way," she said. I looked up, I don't want to run Franklin. I want to restore what made it worth saving. For the first time, Margot smiled. "That's why it's you." And just like that, I wasn't returning as a ghost. I was returning as a reckoning. Not for vengeance or accolades, what I sought was clarity, and I'd never seen more clearly. The building was as I'd left it, marble lobby gleaming under soft light, the receptionist's familiar face breaking into a startled, fleeting smile. The elevator's chime hadn't changed, nor had the mirrors, which once framed a quarter-century of my early mornings and late nights. This time, though, I held no cardboard box. I carried only intent. No company-wide email trumpeted my return. Margot and I had decided that true shifts don't need banners. They unfold quietly, steadily, like roots finding purchase. As I reached the executive floor, Dominic stood in the hallway. His expression, shock bleeding into unease, was a story in itself. "Elaine?" My name caught in his throat, waited. "Dominic," I replied, my voice even, almost warm. He glanced toward the boardroom, where a meeting loomed. "What are you doing here?" I offered a faint smile. "Joining the new owners. You might want to come along." I stepped past him, leaving a silence that echoed. In the boardroom, the members sat taut, Margot commanding the space like a sculptor before marble. Her eyes met mine, a single deliberate nod. "Good morning," she began, her tone crisp. "As of today, Langston Group assumes majority control of Franklin and Associates." A sharp inhale circled the table. One director paled. Dominic, frozen at the room's edge, clutched his notes like a lifeline. "We're also redefining leadership, culture, and vision," Margot continued, then gestured to me. "Elaine Hartley returns as strategic partner steering our client and culture vision. She holds absolute authority in her scope. Her word is final." A pen slipped from someone's hand, clinking against the table. Dominic's face flickered pale, then flushed. "This is," he stammered. Margot's gaze cut him off, cool and precise. "You chose your path months ago, Dominic. We've chosen ours." I didn't linger to savor the moment. I moved to my new office, a corner space, open and bright, with a wide view of the lake. It felt expectant, unclaimed. On the desk sat a folder bearing my name, onboarding forms, org charts, notes from Margot's team. Tucked behind them was a plain envelope, no mark or sender. Inside, a note in flowing cursive. "You weren't just missed, you were vital." No signature, but I knew Miguel's hand. I stood at the window, the city stretching below, not strategizing or reminiscing, but absorbing what it meant to return without malice, to stand in this place clearer, stronger, unbound. They'd once thought procedures could replace me. Now they understood. Loyalty isn't built by systems, it's woven through people. In the weeks that followed, I didn't tear the place apart, I sparked renewal. I met clients not with polished decks, but with shared stories over coffee. I reached out to colleagues who'd been edged out, asking, "Want to shape something true?" Together, we didn't forge a flashy new chapter, we rekindled what should have lasted. One day I passed the conference room where my world had unraveled months before. It was still, empty. I stepped inside, let the memory graze me, then walked out, leaving it behind like a shed skin. I hadn't come back to dwell on old hurts. I'd returned to plant something enduring in familiar earth. They'd let me go, mistaking me for a fading star. I came back not to shine, but to anchor, not loud, not bitter, undeniable. I didn't rush, I moved with purpose. True rebuilding isn't about flashy all-hands speeches or glossy mission statements pinned to a website. It's in the quiet steps, walking the halls, sitting still long enough for people to believe you'll be there when they look again. I began with a small list, the overlooked, the ones bypassed for promotions, not because they lacked skill, but because they didn't chase spotlight. No elite degrees, no slick charm, just steady hands that got the work done, driven by care. Miguel was first. He stepped into my office, his familiar quiet nerves flickering until he saw the chair opposite me, not a summons, but an invitation. "I'm pulling you from client services," I said. His face shadowed, then brightened as I continued. I want you leading our next generation strategy unit. He blinked. Me? You, I said. You hear what's unsaid. You read rooms before you speak. That's rare. I need you to shape it and teach it. He didn't answer right away. For a full minute he sat, weighing the moment as if it held his entire future. It likely did. When he said, "I'm in," it wasn't a deal sealed, it was a spark kindled. Next came Karen, operations veteran of 30 years, all sharp edges and no nonsense. She ran logistics like a master strategist, seeing what others missed. Dominic had pushed her aside after one meeting, dismissing her as anti-innovation. I found her on the archive floor, hunched over vendor contracts, pen in hand. She stood as I approached, but I waved off formality. "No speeches," I said. "Just this. Are you done being invisible?" Her eyes narrowed. "I was done years ago." "Then come upstairs. We've got gaps only you can see." Slowly, deliberately, we gathered the right people, not by clearing out the wrong ones, but by calling forward those who belonged. No sweeping reorgs, no performative firings labeled streamlining, just conversations one by one, rebuilding trust earned, not enforced. We reshaped how work was measured, not just metrics, but meaning. We rewrote client renewals to weave in the wisdom only seasoned hands could offer. We revived small gestures, holiday calls, anniversary notes that made this place feel alive again. One day a longtime client sent a box of cookies with a note. "It's Franklin again, keep going." Not everyone embraced it. Some of Dominic's picks slipped away quietly, others lingered, wary and sharp. I didn't chase them. Their unease did the sorting, adapt, or drift elsewhere. This time fear didn't rule, belonging did. One evening I lingered late, the office hushed as cleaners moved in soft rhythm. I paused at a small neglected desk near the back, once Lila's, the receptionist whose hours were cut, replaced by a machine. No one had thanked her. I jotted a note to find her. Rebuilding wasn't just for those still here. It was for everyone who'd ever poured themselves into this place, a promise that we could still be what they'd believed in. That Friday morning, the office held a quiet that felt alive, not vacant, but settled, like a room after a long, honest conversation. I arrived before the sun breached the skyline, drawn by instinct more than obligation. The city outside shimmered in the fragile blue of early dawn, and the building seemed to breathe in rhythm with my steps. 6 months had passed since I'd returned, not as the figure they remembered, but as something less defined, a presence that didn't fit neatly on a chart. No one answered to me directly, yet when decisions hung heavy, their glances sought me out. A young associate tapped on my door, folder in hand, voice unsteady. "I just wanted to say thanks for staying late last week. You didn't need to." I met his eyes with a gentle smile. "If it's worth doing, you show up fully." He nodded, almost bowed, and slipped away. A fleeting moment, but it rooted itself in me. I'd once believed legacy was forged in grand gestures, sealed contracts, corner offices, names in bold. Now, I knew it bloomed quieter. In the ease someone carried after you'd left their orbit. That afternoon, I stood at the back of a conference room unnoticed as a client strategy session unfolded. Miguel led with steady grace. Karen mapped operations with clarity. Sasha, a new voice I'd quietly endorsed, layered in cultural depth. It was seamless, human, purposeful, everything we'd worked to reclaim. They didn't see me there. That was by design. This was theirs now. Later, I wandered past the 27th floor wall of portraits, founders, old partners, legends framed in time. My face wasn't among them, and I had no desire for it to be. My imprint lived elsewhere, in a client's renewed trust, a team's quiet confidence, the way this place had learned to listen and move with care. In my office, I flicked off the lights and stood by the window, the lake's stillness reflecting a feeling I'd almost forgotten. Peace. Not the thrill of winning or the weight of power, but the clear calm of having nothing left to chase and everything left to build. Before leaving, I opened an old notebook, its first page scarred with 3 words from the night I was cut loose. What comes next? I turned to a blank page, picked up a pen, and wrote what I now knew. Whatever I shape. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.